is a tax lawyer here talking to me? So I'll tell you why. As was said, I've been involved in 3.1 as a minimum. We do a lot of large wind projects and solar projects that are a few $100 million at a crack. So bottom line is renewable energy policy in the United States is federal income tax policy. As you know, cap and trade and other things that Congress has tried to do haven't really worked yet. They probably will over time. And in the meantime, everything that incentivizes renewable energy generation is through the U.S. tax code. So my clients like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, all of the large financial institutions in America are heavily investing capital into large-scale, utility-scale renewable projects. And so that's why a tax lawyer is involved, because I'm in the center of all this stuff, helping get the money corralled to do some amazing stuff. So with that, given that we're here at the Gwinnett Chamber, I thought I'd take a business focus, try to help folks in the Chamber and the rest of you all in the community help Georgia get into the 21st century as it relates to renewable energy generation. So I'm going to hit you with a lot of numbers, and I'm doing that on purpose because we're talking about a lot of money, and we're talking about a state that has a 10% unemployment rate and needs jobs and needs investments, and we're pretty much turning our back on some amazing opportunities. So I want to impress upon you what's going on everywhere else but here, not only in Georgia, but in the Southeast in particular. So strap on your seatbelts and I'll walk you through some pretty impressive numbers. Renewable energy infrastructure is frankly as important to Georgia's economy as roads and bridges are. The renewable energy industry is also the largest job creation and economic development opportunity for Georgia, if Georgia is smart enough to seize the opportunity. I say this because we battle entrenched economic interests in Georgia, in particular those in the energy sector, which continue to fight to keep renewable energy generation out of widespread use. For too long, Georgians have been passive, waiting for someone else to do something. Well, the folks you've been waiting on are the ones actually causing most of the problem. So as I go through some amazing data today, ask yourself why all Georgians don't know the stuff I'm going to tell you. Let's start with wind energy. The U.S. wind industry has added over 35% of all new electricity generating capacity over the past 4 years in the United States, second only to natural gas and more than nuclear and coal combined. 35% of new utility-scale generation is through wind energy. The American Wind Energy Industry Association, through AWEA, they put together some data. They say that, and I believe this because I do a lot of this stuff myself, 40,181 megawatts of wind power capacity were installed at the end of 2010, with 5,116 megawatts installed in 2010. Wind is the resource being employed by public utilities across the U.S. Yet we read and hear from the utilities here in Georgia that wind doesn't work. But actually it works so well that today U.S. wind power capacity represents more than 20% of the world's installed wind power. The wind industry had well over 5,600 megawatts under construction at the end of 2010, not online yet. That's new energy capacity. Several recent studies, including 2 major studies across the eastern and western interconnects in the U.S., have shown that utilities can typically add wind generation to their power supply mix without major adjustments in planning, operations, or reliability of their systems, which explains why 14 new wind-related industrial manufacturing facilities were brought online in 2010, leaving over 400 wind-related manufacturing facilities online in the U.S. at the end of the year. Think of the jobs. During the first quarter of 2011, construction began on at least 850 megawatts of new wind projects. These are spread across 26 states. And the U.S. wind industry installed 1,118 megawatts of wind power in the first quarter of 2011 as compared to 540 megawatts in the first quarter of 2010. So we're doing even more this year, now, as we speak. The projects completed in the first quarter were spread across 12 states. These installations bring the U.S. cumulative capacity of wind power to 41,400 megawatts. And according to the National Federal Renewable Energy Lab, the Southeast has over 272,000 megawatts of wind potential. This was in their March 2010 wind survey. Now, I've given you packets. I only brought 50, and there's 100 of us here, but there's a thick packet on every other chair in the room here, and you can see state by state where the wind is, what the resource is, and it's very interesting stuff. For a long time, the Georgia Public Utilities have been telling you that there's no wind, or the wind that we have is offshore or in the mountains, and that's not true because you've got the study right there in your hands. Florida has much less wind than Georgia, and yet one of my clients is currently developing a $250 million wind farm in Florida. That's onshore, and there's no mountains in Florida. So Georgia needs to focus on its onshore wind potential. We are behind the rest of the country. Let's shift over and talk to biomass. On the biomass front, despite Georgia telling the world it has the best environment for biomass fuel, which it actually does, we have very little new investment in biomass. Now, Georgia certainly is shipping wood to Europe, where the Europeans are using our wood as fuel. Again, this is because the forces that govern power generation resources in Georgia truly prefer coal, gas, and nuclear and actively discourage biomass. There was a recent Atlanta Business Chronicle article on that issue. The state itself, through GIFA, downplays the potential. They say we only have 672 megawatts of capability. However, in general, the biggest victory for biomass actually came in January when the Environmental Protection Agency announced it would put off for 3 years a decision on whether biomass greenhouse gases should be regulated under the Clean Air Act. This affects about 100 biomass plants now on the drawing table across the country, and of course a handful of those are here in Georgia. But the last I saw through the state office, I think Georgia's had about 34 biomass plants that were not really anywhere close to either being financeable or moving ahead, although there's always an exception that pops up. But again, state law, Georgia state law, and other factors continue to keep most biomass plants still on the drawing board in Georgia. Let's talk about solar now. The solar energy industry is the fastest growing industry in America, but again, not here in Georgia. And this should trouble you, because according to Ron Resch of the Solar Energy Industry Association, also known as SEIA, the solar industry is growing faster than the U.S. telecommunications industry and equaling the employment level of the coal industry, which I find interesting. Outside of Georgia, in the solar industry, the Mid-Atlantic region is now beating California as the largest market in the U.S. for solar photovoltaic installations. Nationally, the result is that now in China, the conversation there is about America and its path to become the world's largest solar market within 2 years. And it's now a matter of national U.S. security. Because of this, more U.S. companies want to learn about huge solar market growth outside of California and in the heartland of the U.S. So today I'd like to set the record straight and inform you all about how solar has grown over the last year, as well as where the solar industry is headed. I'd also like to make clear the challenges and opportunities we face in Georgia, given how much bad information both the state and the state's utilities have offered the public in the past. First, Georgia is among the best states for solar. Why no one knows that is truly amazing. The National Renewable Energy Lab has collected weather data for over 30 years from 6 weather stations located throughout Georgia. Georgia has more sun than most places on Earth, and even Chairman McDonald of the Georgia Public Services Commission says Georgia is a good place for solar. But yet our public policies and state laws retard capital investment and job creation in the solar energy generation sectors. So Georgia ranks 10th among states for solar power potential, but ranks low 38th in the number of energy systems connected to the electricity grid. Why does this matter? It matters because Georgia is suffering with near 10% unemployment. We need jobs, we need investment, and yet we're letting this pass us by. Solar is a huge area of growth for our international economy, yet it's one area we're literally purposefully avoiding here in Georgia. So let's be clear what I'm talking about. In 2010, the U.S. saw 878 megawatts of new grid-connected solar, and that was double what it was in 2009. U.S. solar revenue grew from $3.7 billion to more than $6 billion last year alone. That's a growth rate of 67%, while the rest of the U.S. economy grew at less than 3%. And it's not a fad, and it's not a bubble. It's real hard capital assets that generate clean, no fuel required power for 30 years with virtually no maintenance. And at year-end 2010, the U.S. had 2,593 megawatts of installed solar electric capacity, which means the U.S. ranked third in the world for new solar. And this is just the tip of the iceberg of economic opportunity that Georgia is allowing to pass its by. Germany, with solar resources similar to Alaska, was first, Italy was second, the U.S. was third, Japan was fourth. But the U.S. is still expected to become the largest solar market in the world in a few years. In 2010, the U.S. solar industry employed 93,000 workers. The number is expected to grow by 26% by August this summer. That's about 25,000 new jobs, mostly small business, and sadly, most of them not here in Georgia. Solar also attracted more venture capital than any other industry in the United States, which is what makes the solar energy industry the fastest growing industry in America. Let me repeat that. Solar energy industry is the fastest growing industry in America today. This means opportunity, jobs, profits, better, cleaner air, more water resources, etc. And it means a better world for you and your kids. And that's the real reason Georgia should be using solar energy. I'll bet you didn't know that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced a settlement last month with the Tennessee Valley Authority, TVA, to settle alleged Clean Air Act violations at 11 of TVA's coal-fired plants in Alabama, Kentucky, and Tennessee. And remember, TVA has some territory in North Georgia. The settlement will require TVA to invest an estimated $3 to $5 billion on new and upgraded state-of-the-art pollution controls. EPA estimates that the monetized health benefits of these emission reductions will range from $11 to $27 billion per year, including 1,200 to 3,000 premature deaths will be prevented, 2,000 non-fatal heart attacks will be prevented, 800 cases of chronic bronchitis will be prevented, 960 hospital admissions will be prevented, 1,200 emergency department visits for asthma will be prevented, 1,900 cases of acute bronchitis will be prevented, 21,000 asthma attacks will be prevented, 39,000 cases of upper and lower respiratory symptoms will be prevented, 150,000 days when people miss work will be prevented, and 880,000 days when people must restrict their activities will be prevented. Just from breathing coal emissions from your electricity. Again, 11 to 27 billion per year. TVA serves 9 million people. That's $1,222 per person per year if we assume 11 billion and $3,000 a year per person per year at 27 billion. That's either $100 or $250 a month extra added to your electric bill, collected through the healthcare system, not by the utility. So I ask you, is there any real difference between what's going on up there and what's happening here? Of course not. It's just a difference of degree at best. Could be worse. This is one of the reasons we have healthcare costs in America. If you take that 11 billion number, multiply that by each of the 50 states, that's 550 billion. If you do it with the $27 billion number, that's $1,350 billion. And that's the impact on a utility that serves only 9 million persons. America has 310 million people. I probably got these numbers, like, I'm giving you probably a tenth of what the actual number is. So I know my numbers are wrong. Annually. This means that the Obama healthcare plan has really done more to benefit the public utilities than any other industry outside of the medical field. And so the question is your cheap power really going to remain that cheap? I don't think it will. Power bills are going to have to go up when the TVA type impacts start to be accounted for. So it's important to know these things and understand why renewable energy is a lot cheaper than you're told it is. And that's why in the U.S. the residential solar market grew last year by 68%. The commercial market grew by 79%. And the utility scale solar market, the fastest growing, grew by an incredible 246%. Last year, 16 separate states installed more than 10 megawatts. That's up from 4 states. Georgia, we're trying to get a few megawatt done. God knows if we can get that done. What we do know, in 2010, Georgia state tax credits totaling almost $2 million were awarded to 47 solar projects and 90 solar hot water heating installations in Georgia. That's about $5 million spent statewide if you factor in the value of the credit. What it costs to do about 1 megawatt. In the meantime, we see the Mid-Atlantic regions beating California as the largest market. In fact, New Jersey market grew by 139% and became only the second state to install more than 100 megawatts in a single year. They did more last year than we've done in the entire 200-some-year history of the state. On the manufacturing side, while there were a few solar manufacturing plant closures in 2010, the solar industry started building over 50 new factories in the last 18 months in the U.S. And the solar industry is hiring workers by the thousands. In fact, every day more than 100,000 Americans go to work at well-paying, stable jobs at solar businesses, from small installers all the way up to Fortune 500 companies that I work with, and that number is expected to grow by another 20,000 again by the end of this year. Even in the middle of coal country, there are more than 7,000 Pennsylvanians working in the solar industry. That's the same number that work in the coal mines. These U.S. markets, unlike Georgia's local market, are catalyzed by smart, cost-effective, state-level policies that apply brilliant technology and innovation to revolutionary business plans by private solar companies, most of which are small businesses. Here in Georgia, my firm and others are working hard to develop the most effective policy infrastructure at the state level to ensure a level playing field for Georgia solar businesses as compared to the rest of the country. This is because the U.S. market is based on both federal and state policy, and there's a lot of work we can do in the state houses here in the Southeast, and in particular in the Georgia legislature. So first and foremost, in this time of budget cutting and austerity, we voters have to first defend the renewable energy investments that our state policymakers here in Georgia have already made. Specifically, Georgia lawmakers have expanded the state tax credit for renewable energy in the last session, and we need more of that kind of support. Last year, the Georgia General Assembly also passed PACE-enabling legislation, and that showed leadership, and we need to move ahead on that. And the voters also paved the way for an amendment to the Georgia Constitution to allow the state to enter into energy efficiency contracts. So we can see that our state lawmakers are beginning to understand that these days of giving Georgia's power companies absolute control over your energy future no longer fits the 21st century energy model that this nation needs. Thanks to the support from Republican Governor Deal, Senate Floor Leader Ronnie Chance, who's a Republican from Peachtree City, and Representative David Knight, another Republican, chairman of the Special Committee on Small Business Development and Job Creation, we've been able to get something done this year. This is a conservative issue. This is jobs. This is economic. This isn't green, clean, tree-hugging, hippie stuff. Right? And so in addition to promoting more renewable-friendly specific policies here in Georgia, we need Georgia governments at every level to actively embrace solar energy. We need more public solar installations to help instill confidence in these technologies. Americans really do want to understand this stuff, and recent polls show it. The solar system on top of the Georgia Tech Aquatics facility is a perfect example. It's been operating, I think, since 1997. It was at the time the largest rooftop solar system built in the country. In 1997. It occupies 3/4 of an acre. It creates enough electricity to power 35 homes, and it has no maintenance. I mean, it works. It's sitting right under our noses, but nobody knows about it. So I think hope still springs eternal. I mean, fortunately, this is America. The politicians and public utilities serve you, not the other way around. And if you don't talk to our governor, and if you don't talk to your state lawmakers and your mayor and city council and ask them to go to solar and use solar, or talk to your school board, your church leaders, your local business owners, then you're going to get pretty much what we have right now, a state that's 38th, despite being at the top for solar resource. So as I finish up here, the state of the union of renewable energy in Georgia is impaired. Yet solar remains the strongest and easiest, most cost-effective option for renewable energy we have, and the healthiest and cleanest too. So if we change some laws in Georgia, laws that allow consumers to use solar the way that folks in 45 other states are allowed to use, you and your business will immediately benefit. The technology is here, it's tried, tested, and true. Public utilities throughout the country are successfully using it. They know it, they understand it. There's nothing to learn. It's all known. They can ask their colleagues how to do it. Only state law prevents you from really being able to use solar in an economical manner as you see fit, and it's that's our challenge. Finally, utility scale grid storage is here. I work with companies who are using it. It's real, and public utilities are starting to use it more and more. So even this, the last objection to why we can't use wind, why we can't use solar, is falling by the wayside as the world moves deeper into the 21st century. So the old days, the old ways of conventional power generation are needing to change. They still have a place and they still have a role, but it's not the only game in town. It's one of the ones that we need to be most careful with. But it's an exciting time. We need to just catch up with the rest of the country. And that's, of course, what I do on a daily basis. Thank you.